Sup guys, today we'll be going over Terrence Fletcher in the movie Whiplash, played by J.K. Simmons, and we're going to be answering, was he really right? So in the beginning of the film, we first see Terrence Fletcher finding a victim in Andrew Neiman, and we could see this in the opening scene when he is introduced to the actual story, and he is wearing like this all black, mysterious, dark looking outfit, while Miles Teller, Andrew Neiman, is wearing a white t-shirt representing his innocence, while Terrence Fletcher is engulfed in darkness. You could even see that he's like covered in shadows while Andrew Neiman's in the spotlight. In the beginning of the film, we do see Fletcher asking about Neiman's personal life and his background involving his mom leaving him and him having a dire interest in pursuing music and being one of the greats. They kind of come to terms with the understanding of his teaching methods already, and we kind of see Fletcher start to manipulate the young Andrew Neiman, and he becomes under his wing a little bit in this, and he kind of lets him think he's off the hook at the beginning. Fletcher begins to torment Neiman and using these remarks of his personal life being his mom who walked out on him, and he also makes attacks at his father as well, as we could see. And then we have the infamous scene that I'm pretty sure everybody knows, the "Are you rushing or dragging?" and the "Not quite my tempo" scene. And we do know, I have seen from like musicians who have reviewed the scene in the comments that he was honestly never off his tempo, and it was just a form of gaslighting and manipulation to really test what Andrew Neiman was made of. And obviously, he did break down and go cry, but he didn't walk out and just quit like the other musician who was in the scene, who also got like very abused verbally by Terrence Fletcher. And I guess that's where we see that Neiman's different, and he's obviously made from a different fabric, not one that the Mars bar guy. Fletcher's extreme tactics in gaslighting his students into getting the best out of them in terms of performance and mentally draining them at the same time is one of his go-to tactics when it comes to, I guess, getting their best performance. And he does this by making them question their own reality and skill set, of course. And since he obviously is this very intimidating bald guy who's pretty strong looking and always wears black, and I'm pretty sure everybody fears him in the conservatory at this point, nobody seems to question his judgment. So even if they presume that they are doing well. If Fletcher does think they're off, and when it's really a game, there's not much they could really do about it. They kind of have to accept it, and that's when they either break down or they just quit. It usually is a mix of both. We kind of see that with the other student as well. He ends up just quitting, but Andrew Neiman, of course, he just stays in the band, because this is what he wants to do for the rest of his life. In Terrence Fletcher's ridiculous methods of educating his students to be the best, he uses a form of positive punishment, and Fletcher is applying a negative stimulus, hence him belittling Andrew and the other students by tormenting them with very rude insults, attacking their personal life, their frame, their stature, even their moral compass at some point. This might be working for producing some of Schaefer's top core musicians in the country, but we still need to ask ourselves, is this morally right? We begin to see the resentment that Andrew has for his family, and this does kind of include his father, because during the argument at the dinner table scene, we do see that nobody really respects his profession, and they kind of just favor the people who are playing varsity. And of course, Andrew does bounce back and tell him that he's in Division 3, which is not particularly hard or challenging comparing to being one of the best in the country for being a musician. And Andrew does take this personally, and even though we do see his father on his side and in his corner throughout the movie, we can notice that he's not really present to be found anywhere to defend his own son. So we kind of see that his absence of a father kind of transcends into him looking at Fletcher as a father figure and looking for somebody to make proud and seek approval from. As the film progresses, his own father does realize too that Neiman thinks highly of Fletcher, since he is well respected at one of the best performing arts schools. Neiman begins to withdraw from his family, including breaking up with his girlfriend, and we don't see his father as much as we do in the beginning of the film. So Neiman then begins to overcommit himself to his profession. He drums a lot on his own time until he starts bleeding. He breaks his set a lot. And his one and only goal is to prove himself to the world and to Fletcher as well to seek his validation and approval. So the car accident scene is where everything finally hits the fan. And this is also where Fletcher does draw the line, but from what he sees as morally right, and that questions his career teaching methods. And before the accident, Neiman does argue with Fletcher, and Fletcher, surprisingly, he still decides to give him the part after, giving it to the alternates, because I think he was pretty late and he forgot his sticks as well, which is why he rushed back and got hit by a semi truck and just started sprinting to the orchestra. And he does say to Fletcher, "You would have cut me by now," because he did earn that part. He says it himself, and he goes into a little feud with the other musicians as well, which is pretty funny. And he does realize that he is Fletcher's Charlie Parker, because it is true, he would have cut him by now if it weren't for his his talent and his drive that he does have. Eamon is so far deep into his dedication to music that he does not understand how far he's taking himself until Fletcher finally draws that line, and he is hit by that semi truck, and the adrenaline and his mindset keeps him going, running to perform. I'm pretty sure any normal person with a functioning brain would probably be suffocating, choking on their own blood on the floor there, and probably begging for an ambulance. I would too, the same. But not everybody's Andrew Neiman, so he ends up ruining the performance. But his will alone keeps him going, which is the part that makes Fletcher realize that it's time to put an end to this before he actually dies, and he keeps going. And Neiman is lost and betrayed after he gets cut. We see Neiman try to attempt to return back to his normal life, and it honestly doesn't end up working out. His girlfriend's with another guy, and he ends up running to Fletcher too, who also got fired at the club, and he asks him to play for him. I think he's running with the same Studio Blend playlist, so that's obviously why he recruits him, and nobody knows the charts like he does, which basically just singles him out. As Fletcher is completely pissed with Andrew starting the band without him, Andrew becomes the conductor. He cues every other musician into the song. He takes full control of the entire band. He creates his own rhythm for the band. Fletcher even questions his own use and his purpose in the actual orchestra. And Fletcher becomes replaced by what he has produced, by his own creation, through his ridiculous teaching methods. And Neiman's father is just left speechless in absolute horror in seeing what he really has become. And meanwhile, while the father's terrified, Fletcher has an evil, smug smile looking on his face, and he knows he finally got what he wanted, but this is at the cost of Neiman's livelihood. And the ending does cut to black without even hearing the crowd cheering, which kind of resembles that Andrew really only cared about the recognition and success and his history cemented in music. He didn't really care about people cheering and also proving himself to Fletcher. And Chazelle, the director, of course, mentions that in an interview that Neiman was likely to die in his 30s to overdose, coping with the stress and the toll that he took on his health, and through the circumstances he faced it with the mental abuse, of course. And yeah, sure, Neiman did get what he wanted, but it came with a price, consequences too as well. And sadly, the movie, the villain does win. I said the villain does win, but we don't know whether to feel bad for Andrew or proud for his accomplishment. And my final answer is, statistically proven, he probably is right that they do need to be pushed more to see what they're really capable of, but morally, through his tactics, definitely not.